New Life Lutheran Church. We are just so glad to be able to share this space for this very important event. So thank you all for coming, and again, welcome. So this event is, of course, the Interfaith Convocation on Climate Change, and Mark will be telling you a little bit more about how this day is going to go over the next few hours. But yeah, so looking forward to what faith leaders here in this community have to say on this all-important issue that's facing us, that's been facing us, that's still facing us, that will face us, right? Okay, so I just have a couple of quick announcements before we begin. First off, so per the flyers that were handed out that have been posted over the past month or so, masks are required in here if you were sitting in the congregation. So if you forgot one, if you need one, we do have masks over right next to the glass doors back here. And we also have hand sanitizer back there as well. The bathrooms, all important question. So we have 3 bathrooms here. We are blessed with bathrooms. So we have one bathroom back over through the left exit door. You go through that door and then take a right and around. There's a single stall bathroom over there. There are 2 bathrooms through this exit door right behind you. If you go to the left, there is a women's room with a couple of stalls. If you go to the right, there is a single stall unisex bathroom over there. And if you need to fill up on water or anything, or if you need to fill up on water, our kitchen is also through that exit door to the right, where you can fill up. We don't have any fountains here, we just have a sink, but water is water in that case. And one final announcement, somebody let me know that there's a Honda Fit outside in the parking lot that has their windows down. So you may want to check that because there is a good chance of rain here in the next couple of hours. The license plate number is SB27912. All right. With that said, Art Levy.
By the way, if you don't recognize me, I gave up my COVID hair for Lent. Now if we could just give up fossil fuels forever, we'll be set. This event is called an Interfaith Convocation because we have a number of different religious faiths here in the community. Most of them are represented, all were invited. And we have 10 speakers who will give a short 10-minute mini sermon, you might say. So we do have a long program, and we will have a break. I also called it, I subtitled it on the PSA, What's Faith Got to Do with It? And Tina Turner declined to show up. Reached out. So we're going in reverse alphabetical order for one reason, and that is the speaker who is coming a little late from Yakos was at the beginning of the alphabet. So, and the other reason is I just like to do things backwards. You know, you probably have experienced that. We will have a break in the middle, about 3:30 or so, maybe a little later, so that people can go out and check the electric vehicles that are here. There are about half a dozen that are parked just the other side of the disabled on this side of the church, and also a bike, electric bike out front. He'll probably be available as long as we're not filming the break. And then we'll have the time for questions and discussion. We have a mic in the middle there for people to raise whatever questions they have or make whatever comments they would like to make. Let's see, I think that about covers it. We should just get this started. I told you I like to do things backwards, didn't I? So I'm going to, oh yeah, right, and then the thing about masks, if you're speaking, you can remove your mask. I think it's a little easier to be heard and clear. I mean, it's this whole mask thing, you know, it's like the virus keeps waving goodbye and then not leaving.
Yeah, like Putin.
So we're just playing it safe. Our first speaker, who was at the bottom of the alphabet, was just up here before me, just switching places here, is Reverend Paul Strike, and he, as he said, is the pastor at this church, New Life Lutheran Church. He's an ordained minister in the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, and he already told you about the bathrooms. So, Reverend Paul.
I do have one more piece of housekeeping for our speakers of shorter stature, but not in heart, or big in heart, small in
It's my
physical
surprise.
stature.
It's my surprise.
What?
It's my surprise.
Surprise. Oh.
Okay. Oh, okay.
We do have a thing that you can pull out here in the lecture. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Mark. So I don't think that the 16th century church reformer Martin Luther. Does anybody know who Martin Luther is? At least heard about Martin Luther. Okay. I don't think that Luther said this quote, but it is part of his mythology, which is something that just happens over centuries and centuries of religious tradition. If Luther was told that the world were to end tomorrow, what would he do? And Luther said, "I'd plant an apple tree today." This is, at the bottom of things, the hope that we as Lutherans carry with us when dealing with any type of crisis. And this includes the real and present danger of climate change. Even in the face of despair. And I think that most of us would say that there are plenty of reasons to despair, right? We are called to act in hope. In hope. So New Life here is an ELCA Lutheran Church, and this means that we are part of the broader Christian tradition. We hold the Hebrew Scriptures and the Scriptures of the New Testament to be divinely inspired texts. And so we look to the Scriptures' witness about God to help us to kind of figure out what God is like, as well as to figure out what God also kind of desires for us. It's kind of our basic understanding of what Scripture is for us. So regarding issues of the environment and our care of it, 4 basic themes kind of spring up. Now first, God created and God continues to create and sustain all creation, calling it very good. Not just humans, but all creation. God calls it very good. And God's vision seems to be one of goodness and redemption for all of creation. So this seems to displace any sort of anthropocentric or human-centered kind of worldview. Okay, that's theme number 1. Theme number 2. People, you and I, who are made in God's image, and we are meant to care for the earth the way that God cares for the earth. So this care does not mean dominion, does not mean exploitation. Instead means love. It instead means servitude. It means treating it as the gift that it is. However, our sin and our brokenness, or our stuff, to put it in short term, or in short grade, our stuff that kind of cuts us off from one another, from God, and from all creation, has led us to instead seek our own good. And that often comes at the expense of others. Thus we harm the very things that we are meant to take care of. There is good news, though, in our Christian tradition. Of course, I'm not here to proselytize or anything. I'm just trying to state the facts here. Through God's mercy and grace in Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, we have been freed from the destructive power of sin. That is what Lutherans believe. So we are then able to look beyond ourselves, beyond our own selfish needs and desires and ambitions, though, of course, as you can see around us, we are not perfect at doing that. In our freedom from sin, we are called to be part of this still very good creation that God has created and still envisions. So we do this through loving relationships with God, with one another, and with creation. And as you all know, the last theme is relationships require action. Do they not? Can I get an amen? Yes.
Amen.
That's a good thing. We are called to participate as good caretakers of the earth and all that we do as individuals and then also as communities. We are called to give voice to the voiceless, not only those trees and the waters and all the animals, but also the poor and the powerless folks that are more often than not the ones who are most affected by climate change. So we are called not only to speak difficult truths, but to speak out and act out in hope. Also a difficult thing to do, and especially in the purview of daunting scientific reports. So, as the representative of Lutheranism here, I am here to say that Lutherans are called to hope. That is what our call is. And it's not a Pollyannish hope. It's not a Pollyannish hope that things are going to be hunky-dory because we believe in Elon Musk, or we believe that God will put some sort of stop to all of this before it all comes crashing down over our eyes. We don't really have those kinds of promises, I don't think. They're not really aligned with what we take God's vision to be, right? The vision is that creation is very good. The vision is that creation must be tended to and cared for. The vision is that God is deeply involved in this work. And the vision is that creation is not meant to be exploited and destroyed for the temporary benefit of a chosen few. As Lutherans today, we are called to urgently hope in this vision. Urgent hope is what will drive us to do, or will drive us to make good decisions, come to needed solutions, and come to changes in how we relate with one another and with creation. This urgent hope is what will keep us wanting to be better, to care deeper, and to love wider. This urgent hope is what will keep us planting apple trees. Thank you.
Amen.
I meant to mention that before I left the house, Debbie said, be real careful what jokes you tell. No fear of getting ahead. Because after all, I am in a church, and I do not want to be struck down by either God or Will Smith. Tough crowd. Okay. Just introduce the next speaker. Dr. Dean Schrock is trained as a psychologist and served as director of mind-body medicine. You can hear me without this. For a physician management group of 40 cancer centers, where he taught and researched a wellness program that improved survival with cancer. He is also the author of 2 books, Doctor's Orders, Go Fishing, and Why Love Heals, which I believe he has in the back. Is that correct? People are interested. Which detail his program and research. He currently is one of the ministers for the Florence United Universalist Fellowship, Florence Unitarian. It's a good thing I put my glasses on. Florence Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Today, he will talk about climate change from a spiritual perspective and why greed and self-centeredness are not wrong. I'm waiting to hear that. Instead, this is a time of great spiritual growth and transition. Dr. D.
Firstly, Mark, thank you for the invitation to participate today. I'm really pleased to be here and appreciate the opportunity to hear so many different perspectives on what we might do to help ourselves and each other for a very important concern. I'm currently writing a book I've titled, Your Life Comes with Instructions. All of the content is intuitive. Every chapter has come from my dreams, meditations, and channeled conversations. In one of the dreams, I was asked to research the topic of sustainable living and our connection with nature. I was told that this is a moral crisis and that ecology held the answer to all of this. Everything is interrelated, and every part affects the whole. We truly need to treat others and all of life the way we would like to be treated. This was especially true in the way we treat the environment. Our continued pollution of the air, water, and soil has now become a climate emergency and is the greatest threat to global health. I was specifically told about the need for clean water, recycling, environmental policies, and the destruction of the earth through various mining practices. There has been a tremendous disregard for the earth and its properties. My dreams referred to this in very strong terms, such as calling it soulless, rape, and exploitation. As I meditated on this information I received, I decided to ask Mother Earth directly for her feelings about this. I was surprised at what I then felt, but I guess I shouldn't have been. She felt angry, sad, depleted, and withdrawn. She was actually glad for the current pandemic and the time it was giving her for a much-needed rest. She was recharging and reasserting herself. But she felt ravaged and clearly wanted and needed our help. Here are some of the things I learned and what we can do to help. The largest contributors to the Earth's destruction and all her species are the burning of fossil fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas. Other major contributors are agricultural and manufacturing practices, along with deforestation and politics. All of these have contributed significantly to All of these have contributed significantly to rising temperatures, which result in heat waves and wildfires. The melting of the Arctic and rising sea levels, weather extremes and storms, and loss of carbon-absorbing resources like our forests and oceans. Then imagine what happens every year when about 8 million tons of plastic waste enters the ocean from coastal nations. That's the equivalent of setting 5 garbage bags full of trash on every foot of coastline around the world. Eventually, the plastic made from fossil fuels is broken down into microplastics, but it can last hundreds of years and be nearly impossible to capture clean up. Thank you. Unfortunately, millions of birds, fish, and other marine organisms are killed as a result. Today, microplastics have been found literally everywhere on Earth, including our drinking water and the air we breathe. I was really surprised to discover that industrialized fishing may be an even greater threat to marine wildlife. It has wiped out 90% of the world's large fish, along with 300,000 dolphins, whales, and porpoises every year, and 30,000 sharks every hour. This overfishing by commercial fishing, as well as bottom trawling, where giant nets capture and bulldoze everything, destroying the habitat, flattening it, and destroying its ability to support life. It is estimated that nearly 4 billion acres of seafloor are destroyed every year. The impact on biodiversity is obvious, and it is reported that bottom trawling also releases more carbon emissions than global aviation. No wonder Mother Earth is feeling so angry, sad, and exploited. So what can we do about this? What do you want to do about this? When I meditated about this, I got the image of peeing in a swimming pool. We think no one will notice. And it can't really make a difference. How's a little pee going to hurt this large pool of water? Except now we find that our individual practices of not recycling and questionable waste disposal add up to significant toxic waste that affects our most important resources: the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the soil we grow our food in. On a much larger scale, we also need to consider the effects of agricultural practices such as the use of pesticides, herbicides, and toxic runoff. Chemicals used in food packaging, clothing, and carpeting, called PFAs, do not naturally break down and are even found in mother's breast milk at nearly 2,000 times above safe levels for drinking. Forests are being cleared at such a rate that it is estimated it accounts for nearly 20% of all greenhouse gas emissions. Forest vegetation is necessary for removing carbon dioxide from the air, but I found that forests the size of a soccer field are being removed every second to make way for crops like soy and palm oil and for cattle grazing. The good and the bad news is that all these threats to Mother Earth are human-caused. We can change this. We can make a difference. When I meditated about this, I was asked if I wanted to live in a pig pen. We can live so much more sustainably by simply taking more responsibility for the home where we live. Most importantly, I was told that our elected officials need to protect and serve the interests of its citizens versus undue influence from lobbyists and special interest groups. The simple answer is to vote. We need to elect political leaders who are genuinely interested in our health and well-being. What am I doing for time?
You get a couple minutes at least.
I'm going to cut out some of this.
We're at 2:30. We're at 2:30.
So I'm going to skip a part of history. I want to add an 11th suggestion. I had 10 suggestions for you. We can talk about these later. In my extensive study and practice of mind-body medicine, I know our thoughts and feelings literally create a reality. Our world and all its chaos are a direct reflection of our collective state of consciousness. Like the idea, if you want peace, be peace, we need to refocus from our fears to thoughts and energies that visualize and create sustainable living practices. Turn off TV when bad news appears. Be positive. Find humor. Listen to music. Get out into nature. Create affirmations such as, only love prevails. In addition, I want to say that we've forgotten the bigger picture here, including what I call our forgotten identity of being one with God and all that is. The ultimate purpose in life is to realize the eternal self within, to know of one's union with God and ways to live in harmony with all of creation. So, in what might seem like a huge twist in this narrative so far, I want to conclude by saying that our current greed and self-centeredness, which is creating climate change, is not wrong. But to propose that this is a time of great spiritual growth and transition. We are in the process of maturing from war, poverty, discrimination, and environmental destruction to the maturation of the human species. I encourage you to take time to contemplate that every time it rains pennies from heaven. That every cloud truly has a silver lining. There is indeed hope for a new world where love prevails. Everything that is happening is an opportunity to decide how to nurture and serve our soul, humanity, and our planet. Trust that we are fully supported in our interest to heal and restore our love for all of life and respect for others' rights and dignity. When I was asked to write my new book, I was told that this was an opportunity to let people know, especially if they were feeling desperate, that everything they need is right there inside them. This book was to direct the reader inside. And so I very much encourage you now to go inside with your concerns about climate change. I have been assured in my many dreams, meditations, and channeled conversations that spirit guidance and assistance are always given with great love. Pray and meditate and trust this guidance. There are no mistakes. Peace will follow. Have great gratitude for this knowing. All is well. Safely rest. God is nigh. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dean. I wondered if anybody saw the very hopeful and positive article in the New York Times. It was, I think, either today or yesterday. No New Yorkers here. Oh, yeah, a couple. Did you see it before I sent it to you, Mike? Yeah, it's good. You can look it up. It is very positive.
What is it?
I may send it out on my list.
What's the name of it, Mark?
It's the title of it. I should have written it down before. But Signs of Optimism or Hope, something like that. It's not like we can just forget it and, it's going to be taken care of. But there are some encouraging signs on climate change and global warming.
New York.
Next we have Reverend Bert Schneep. He's a retired United Methodist minister and marriage and family therapist, having served in Northern Illinois and California, Nevada annual conferences of the church, with his last 18 years doing child and family therapy. He taught middle school science and high school biology before entering the ministry. Reverend Schneep.
I think it's probably important for
for you to know that I'm not the minister of the United Methodist Church here in town. I've only been attending it for about 15 years. We are right in the middle of a pastoral change, and I guess I was nominated to be the one to stand in. From the time that the first humans walked upon this earth, they've sought to be identifying what is our origin. They seem to know intuitively that something beyond chance and themselves was behind their appearance. Religions were born. Numerous gods, or a single God, all with powers and intelligence well beyond our human capacities, have been identified and worshipped. Many and varied stories have been told to explain creation. And almost always the apex of those stories, of that creation, was humanity. What has sprung from that seems to be a sense of arrogance and a sense that somehow all the rest of the world in which we live is primarily for our benefit and use, and that we're somehow not directly connected. Particularly over the past few thousand years, I think, we've tried to identify all of those traits which we as humans possess exclusively that make us human, that set us apart from the rest of creation. The result has been a sense of hubris leading to wanton degradation throughout our world. When we degraded one side, we would simply move on to another. When we became too numerous for that moving to be practical, we expected our own intelligence and creativity would somehow find ways to compensate. But we have now reached a point where our direct connection, that which we have so long tried to ignore, has caught up to us. Our abuse of the rest of creation has come to the point where our continued existence depends on our acknowledgement and our attention to that connection we have with the rest of creation. The situation is the rapid warming of the overall climate of the earth, the significant changes which that warming brings about to all of creation, and humanity's response and responsibility in the cause of and in the possible solutions to this climate change. And so the question then is, as people of faith, how are we to respond? In the United Methodist Church, our response to the situation of humanity's degradation of our environment, and especially of the climate, takes place on 4 levels: global, regional, local, and individual. Our global response is rooted in the statements made and in the actions that are taken and initiated by the gathered church delegates from around the world that meets every 4 years in our General Conference. The most recent one was in 2016, which seems like a long time ago, but the 2020 was canceled due to all of the COVID pandemic that we were dealing with. And so our next General Conference is scheduled for 2024. The gathered delegates in 2016 acknowledged our sin, confessing that we have not always been faithful stewards of all that has been committed to us by God, the Creator. For all of creation is the Lord's, and we are responsible for the ways in which we use and the ways in which we abuse that creation. Within our social principles in the United Methodist Church, the global climate stewardship is addressed as we acknowledge the global impact of humanity's disregard for God's creation. Rampant industrialization and corresponding increase in the use of fossil fuels have led to a buildup of pollutants in the Earth's atmosphere. We therefore support efforts of all governments to require mandatory greenhouse gas emissions, to reduce reductions in all greenhouse gas emissions, and call on individuals, congregations, businesses, industries, and communities to reduce their emissions. Two areas of action are, one, making careful choices in how we schedule the locations for our meetings, and with as many as possible, utilizing technology rather than travel for in-person meetings. And two, responding as quickly and as fully as possible to natural and man-made disasters through the United Methodist Committee on Relief. That latter agency has a worldwide reach in response to such events as hurricanes and floods and volcanic eruptions and the aftermath of national violent conflicts that we all have been hearing so much about. Our church is organized into smaller geographical, regional areas, each one more locally focused in their activities. And each region meets annually with clergy and laity members together, making decisions focused on the particular needs of their particular areas. They encourage the study, the prayer, and action on various issues. Our Oregon-Idaho annual conference, meeting in 2021, stated there was in a resolution, we recognize that the global climate is already changing, and we stand ready to participate in the church's response to the increase in weather-related disasters. We urge local ministry settings and members to be better stewards of the world's resources by conserving energy. We urge the annual conference sessions committee to consider alternatives that would significantly lower the carbon footprint of our annual conference, including potential carbon offsets. More information and more resources are available through the United Methodist General Board of Church and Society, the Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon, and the National Council of Churches. Information to assist all of us in the church, in our conversations, and in providing us with information for action. Among other actions taken have been legislative action days, when some of our members have arranged to meet with state legislators to express our concerns and to encourage state actions to meet climate change. They've also been working at producing resources for the use of local congregations to enable their participation on a local level. And our local congregation, the Florence United Methodist Church, we've had a series of sermons focused on our stewardship of God's marvelous creation. And during the months of the pandemic, while we have been worshiping online, we have made a number of upgrades to our church building to improve the air circulation and to cut down and reduce our energy consumption significantly. In the fall of 2019, we helped organize a community-wide plastic recycling collection in our fellowship hall and parking lot. It was successful enough that we continued, and it grew and expanded until we were able to have Eco-Generation of Lane County take over, and the last few have been collections held at the Safe Middle School building. John Wesley, the founder of the Methodist Church, was a prolific writer. He recognized that a life of faith had to be the basic foundation for our lives. He produced many informative tracts for his followers, ranging from the development and maintenance of a robust spiritual life to guidance for healthy living and for ethical behavior in the social sphere. Today's church follows in his footsteps with many resources from our national and international Methodist Church that help us to learn more about how to maintain our foundation of faith, and that include addressing individual and small group ways to address the climate change crisis that we all face. Our individual actions to become better stewards of the creation of which we are an integral part is perhaps the most important part most of us have to play in the future of our world.
Amen.
Thank you.
Just so that people will know who are speaking, Reverend Dawn has volunteered to give you the 2-minute sign, so that we don't go too far over. And she is also up next.
Oh, well.
And she's
Thank you.
volunteered to
Gotta watch.
record
Okay.
and live stream. And Jay Gopler is back there also recording, so this will be available in the future for people who can't be here or want to see it, hear it again. Reverend Don Reynolds is the priest at St. Andrew's Episcopal Church here in Florence, and is just coming up on her first anniversary living here and serving in Florence. She is still a licensed attorney, and for over her 30-year career was a public defender. Yes, just like Ketanji Brown Jackson. A prosecutor and a judge. She served 2 terms as a commissioner for the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, where she worked on protecting critical habitat. Reverend Dawn.
Thank you.
Well, I'm an Episcopalian, and I'll tell you, I did a 10-minute sermon, there would be trouble. So hopefully we'll bring this under the wire. Good afternoon, and Mark, I just want to really thank you so much for your passion and your prophecy, and for all of you who helped organize this, and all of you who are so faithful to this cause and living out your values. So I'm Christian, a priest in the Episcopal tradition, which is itself part of the Anglican tradition, which is the 16th century English version of the Reformation of the Catholic Church, and there before that the Jewish tradition, etc., 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 back to the dawn of our species, and the awe we feel in the presence and experience of life. And what do we do with that sense of awe? The shorthand method of describing the Episcopal faith is that it's built on Scripture, tradition, and reason. Scripture, tradition, and reason are often described as this 3-legged stool, which in turn provides the underpinning of our emphasis in modern times on social justice and environmental justice, or what we call creation care. Now, I should also point out that we are Trinitarian, meaning that we believe in one God in 3 persons, God the Father, Mother, Creator, God the Son, who became human to live with us and help us out, and God the Holy Spirit, this breath of life that keeps shaking things up and inspires us and shakes us up too. I've been an environmental activist since the 1960s. But I want to talk with you today about the modern church, and it's not just our tradition, but certainly it's one we value, in which we recognize the traditions of mysticism and prophetic voice at work in the world, and a very Christian belief that God is still speaking. And I want to begin with astronauts. Now, some of you, a lot of you, are old enough to remember this, but hey, this was when, yeah, yeah, okay. So on July 16, 1969, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Mcclellan lifted off from Cape Canaveral, Florida on Apollo 11. They were on a mission. And just 4 days later, on July 20th, 1969, now I happened to watch it with my grandmother, who started crying. She said, I came out here in a covered wagon. I saw the first car in the state. I saw the first electric light. I'm watching people walk on the moon. That sense of awe. But these astronauts were the first humans to set foot on the moon. And it was a historic accomplishment and a pivotal moment in history. Leading to this moment was the culmination of more than a decade's worth of work in science and engineering and personal and collective vision. The images that the astronauts of the Apollo programs beamed down from space captivated us. In an instant, those astronauts themselves became mystics, prophets. Many were very early leaders in the environmental movement. As we stood by our TVs and listened to voices coming from the beautiful but lifeless moon, we were transformed. And by us, I mean all of us across the planet and all of humanity. What was captured in those startling images was the beauty and the fragility of our blue planet, its delicately balanced ecosystems, all that makes life possible and good. Good. This moment for many of us awakened our souls. We felt for an instant close proximity to all that is holy, and I think that's why we're here today, because we do believe it is holy and we should live sacramentally. This has inspired generations. Loving and caring for all of creation should be simple, right? But it's not. And thank you for that long list of horror stories and the long list of things that people are doing. But as a child, I was taught that God is good, period. That God is love, period. That God created everything and it is good. Now, this was easy for me because our home in Idaho was on the edge of a wilderness area. And it was in north central Idaho. And it was as natural for me to believe in a good God and a caring God as the smell of fresh bread and as readily accessible as hugs from my mom and dad. This understanding, and I've told this story before, but it came to me in an instant, standing on the porch of our farmhouse and watching a snail make his way across a lilac leaf, and the light was shining on him. And in that moment, I knew that God was in that snail and all around, and God was with me. It was a perfect moment, and I was just 4 years old. Now, many of you have had these moments. We live in the Northwest. We get them all the time, right? And please share these theophanies with me because I treasure the stories people tell. Now, in the 12th century, and this is one of my heroes, St. Anselm of Canterbury worked it out this way. God just is. God introduced himself that way to Moses in Exodus. I am that I am. And then he says to Moses, go tell Pharaoh that I am sent you. Deliberate. Pretty powerful in its simplicity and all the ground it covers. Anselm took it a bit further because it's such a simple concept that it just blows our minds. To think about it. Anselm said, it is not only that of which nothing greater can be thought. You can't think of anything bigger than just can't. But something greater than can be thought. Our minds just can't wrap ourselves around so much love and so much goodness. For me, Anselm described what I've come to accept and celebrate. We just need to try to live in God and be content. Now, Jesus was a prophet and a mystic. He spoke truth to power with predictable results. He understood the connectivity of all of us and what we are meant to live in and enjoy. One of his parables was always hard for me to understand, but now I think I get it. It's the parable of the pearl of great price. It's a short one, and it goes like this. He said, "Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant seeking beautiful pearls. When he had found one pearl of great price, he went and sold all that he had, and he bought it." I never got that story. I know pearls in ancient days in the Roman times were more valuable than rubies or emeralds or sapphires. They were hard to get. You had to dive deep into the ocean without any aqualungs and find them, and not every oyster yielded the treasure. But why would someone go and buy such a pearl, sit around and stare at it without a home, without furnishing, without anything but the clothes on his back because he's sold it all? Now I see that that pearl is earth. It is earth itself, everything that lives on it and us. Earth and all its creeks, its rivers, its streams, its animals, its birds, its fish. It's just beauty. Earth with all its subtle dynamic connectivity. Everything, every good thing. And only God could buy it back. And that's, I believe, that is why Christ came to earth. Only life itself can heal what we have broken. We're just meant to live kindly and treat one another kindly and treat our planet kindly. Scientists tell us we get a high from that. It's like a dopamine for our brains. And we also inspire others. People learn to be kind when they see others around them being kind. They recycle when others say, you know, everybody else is recycling. Oh, okay. We create good examples. All of you are prophets. All of you are mystics. The poets among us, the artists, the musicians, anyone who does a job well done and puts their life into it and sees the beauty of it. So keep it up. Listen to your prophetic voice. Listen to the earth around you, your insights into it. Share those with kindness and love, because that's how we're meant to live. Amen.
Good job. Oh, thanks. Nice. Oh. Oh. See, that was.
Next speaker is Dorothy Peterson. She's representing the Baha'i community of Florence, one of over 100,000 Baha'i communities around the world. She serves on the elected Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of Florence, which is the administrative institution for the community. Dorothy.
Actually, my background is in water resources planning and management. I didn't think to let Mark know that. But as a Baha'i, I think of the green old deal, which was in the title here, as the eternal covenant between God and all mankind, through which God, out of love, promises to give continuing guidance to humankind. And we, out of love for our Creator, accept the responsibility for caring for God's creation. We believe that the core teachings found in sacred writings of all major religions come from a common divine source, and we happily work with people of all religious persuasions to care for the planet. Let me give a brief historical perspective for those unfamiliar with the Baha'i faith. In the middle 1800s, Baha'u'llah, founder, declared that God, as a divine physician, had his finger on the pulse of humanity and perceived that the world's equilibrium was upset. Without major changes, life on earth would be unsustainable. Humanity and all our fellow creatures form a unified whole, similar to the cells of the human body. We therefore take a holistic approach, seeing climate change as a symptom of deeper systemic problems. The purpose of his message is to unite the human family and transform our way of life into a peaceful global civilization, able to live on this planet for at least 1,000 years. This message includes teachings, principles, and tools for the spiritual and material transformation of society. Every day we are reminded that war is an unsustainable use of resources. Extremes of poverty and wealth lead to instability of societies, waste, and suffering. Justice is needed. Therefore, the cause of peace and justice and that of ecological healing are inextricably intertwined. Only by understanding that we are a single human family living together on one planet can we address a challenge such as climate change. Baha'u'llah says, the earth is but one country, and mankind its citizens. This guides us in preparing to meet the needs of the times, globally and in Florence. We now live in a transition time between the human race's turbulent adolescent stage and its coming of age, the time when swords will be beaten into plowshares and we will not learn war anymore. Now is the time we need to learn to solve our problems peacefully in order to manage the natural resources of the planet in a sustainable way. That's where faith comes in. It takes faith to believe that in spite of mankind's history and current crises, humanity can change. That these promises are not simply pious hopes, and not only possible, but the next stage in life on this planet. In order to commit our hearts and full effort into action toward this goal, we have to have faith that this is God's will, and the Creator will guide and confirm our efforts, no matter how insignificant we may feel. Science provides an objective and systematic approach to problem solving, while religion provides the ethical framework for action and changes hearts, so that scientific discoveries are applied toward the common good. Science and religion are both needed and can work in harmony. We strive to put our faith's principles into action in our lives and to contribute to the transformation of society. But we also need coordination. A network of elected spiritual assemblies administers our faith communities in 235 countries, and continuing guidance comes from the Universal House of Justice at the World Center on Mount Carmel in Israel. We work with other groups on projects of common interest, such as environmental concerns at local, national, and global levels. I'd like to share a few principles, teachings, and tools from the Baha'i writings that I feel relate to climate change, and examples of how individuals and communities put them into action. One principle is moderation. In a household, this may mean being satisfied with enough, as well as sharing with others. For example, I have always practiced reuse and recycling, but recently I learned that the average family wastes up to 34% of the food they buy. This not only wastes food and the money paid for it, but also the water, fertilizer, and fuel it took to grow the food, deliver it to the store, and refrigerate it. If wasted food is put in the garbage, it takes fuel to haul it to the landfill, and in the landfill, food waste generates methane, a powerful greenhouse gas that contributes to global warming. and this can lead to sea level rise even affecting Florence. So now I try to only buy and cook the amount of food that our household will actually eat before it spoils, and we eat up leftovers. That limits waste, saves money, and reduces methane. This is something that most households can do right now to combat global warming. If we encourage relatives, friends, and neighbors, and enough people do it, we can make an impact on climate change and Florence's future. Another teaching is that the food of the future will mostly be vegetarian. As science also shows that this will be needed to balance food needs with the carrying capacity of the planet. Many Baha'is are adjusting our diets in that direction. I have too, but in moderation. The principle of equality of women and men is so important that if resources for education are limited, girls should receive preference in getting education. On a global basis, women's experience in managing family resources makes them uniquely able to develop strategies for adapting to changing environmental conditions. They must be empowered to bring their knowledge and voice in all areas of community decision-making. In many parts of the world, Baha'is have established classes for girls and women to enable them to fully participate in finding solutions. Consultation is a tool that can be used when planning actions regarding climate change. The process consists of assessing the particular needs of the local community and what resources are available. It is then put into action with the decision. We listen to all voices and perspectives and consider relevant principles before making a plan. Then it is put into action. Afterwards, we reflect on the results and make modifications if needed. The cycle of planning, action, and reflection repeats in a continuous loop, which builds resilience and the ability to adapt to a changing environment. There are many more principles I would talk about, but for time concerns, I'd like to close with a quote from Baha'u'llah. Every man of discernment, while walking upon the earth, feeleth indeed abashed, inasmuch as he is fully aware that the thing which is the source of his prosperity, his wealth, his might, his exaltation, his advancement and power, is, as ordained by God, the very earth which is trodden beneath the feet of all men. There can be no doubt that whoever is cognizant of this truth is cleansed and sanctified from all pride, arrogance, and vainglory.
Our next speaker is Dr. Ruth Miller, and she's known to many of us through her work at the Florence Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. But another hat she wears is as Director of Research at the Gaia Living Systems Institute. There she integrates her studies in anthropology, environmental studies, and systems theory to further our understanding of the relationship between consciousness, culture, and ecology. Dr. Ruth.
It's getting a workout.
Thank you. Oh my. How is everyone here today? This is amazing things we're hearing, eh? Absolutely wonderful. So, I do speak at the Unitarian Church because I'm an ordained interfaith New Thought minister. So I love being in an interfaith environment. And I have worked as a futurist and systems scientist for most of my adult life. And in fact, almost 50 years ago, I helped to review the paper that Stanford Research Institute published saying, at the rate we're going, our carbon emissions are going to cause an amazing global climate change. And that was one of many papers that I helped to write or edit or participate in the process of that were paid for by government agencies and then went on the show. Someone said earlier, I think it was Paul, said that the political process is as much a part of it, no, it was Dean, one of you guys, said the political process is as much a part of the problem as all the things that people have done. When politicians have refused to pay attention to the very, very precise and clear information that they have been given, it makes it very difficult for any change to happen at the governmental, the national level. So I left that particular career path. I've been teaching over the years a model based on general systems theory, ecology, and the anthropological understandings that have been emerging as we've been able to look at other cultures and other times and other places. There is no way that the culture we live in can do what needs to be done in order for us to live in harmony on this planet. That's the fundamental conclusion that systems thinking, anthropology, and ecological studies brings us to. So something has to be radically different. Now, I tend to buy into and totally live from hope. And I have a deep faith in the fundamental essence that I am in all of us. All of the training and all of the sciences that I have studied says it is possible. It is possible for us individually and collectively to become beings who can live in harmony with this beautiful blue marble that we have called home. Gaia Living Systems Institute was created by a group of retired academics, and they kind of left it with me as they moved on to other things. In order to help us pull together the resources that we need individually and collectively to begin to transcend the norms of a culture that must fail. It always has. It's only about 6,000 years old, and humanity's been here for a much longer time than that. And I call that culture empire culture, and it's based on values of acquire, accumulate, and control. And it uses all the things that are associated with the fall of humanity in order to do that. It's a relatively small group of people historically, and only recently has become global. When I was first studying anthropology, about the time those astronauts walked on the moon, there were 5,000 other kinds of cultures on this planet. 5,000 ways of being that were in harmony with how the earth works. Some of them dated themselves and could be dated archaeologically to have lived sustainably in the same location for 50 to 100,000 years. It is possible for humans to do so. That's part of my hope. And it's part of what I would like us to consider today. All the things that we think to do are within the cultural framework. I invite you to consider a different kind of consciousness. a consciousness that steps outside of our cultural framework. All of the churches and all of the religious frameworks that we bring to the moment are part of that culture. And they also all invite us to step outside of that culture into a knowing, a deeper knowing. Dean talks about speaking from that inner place of knowing. Moses heard, I am. Jesus invited us to be far beyond, far outside of the norms of the culture of his day. And we're going to hear about an even more powerful teacher for many more people in a few moments. Where can we go to the outside of? There's only one place, inside. When we go into that inner place, we discover the connections that are the essence of system science. You can never do just one thing. We discover that there is a common source, an intelligence, an informational energy, informed energy that is everywhere present, and we are part of it. And we survive only when we allow that flow to happen. And you know the most powerful way to allow that flow of intelligent, informed energy to support and sustain us is to pray and to meditate. And that's what we need to do. And in that prayer and meditation, we need to learn to find that place where I am, and the goodness that is I am is everywhere present in us, through us, around us, and as us, so that the world may reflect it back to us. Culture, consciousness, and ecology are all tightly interwoven, and they are transformed as we allow ourselves to be transformed. I invite you all to enter that state of being. Thank you.
Okay, we have 4 more speakers. I know it's a long program, but we are going to have a break afterward. And I'd like to introduce Reverend Fred Miller, who has been a practicing Soto Zen Buddhist for more than 40 years. He's a Buddhist monk and an ordained Zen priest. For the past 5 years, he's been leader of the Zen Buddhist Meditation Society of Florence, in affiliation with Birdhaven Zendo in Cheshire, Oregon. He moved to Oregon from the East Coast in 2016, where he was active and trained with several Zen Buddhist communities and teachers. He is a graduate of Sacred Heart College and holds an MLA from Queen's University. Reverend Fred.
Good afternoon.
When one becomes a Buddhist, they accept what we call the precepts. There are 16 of them. They're not commandments. They're guidelines for a wise, just, and fulfilling life. The first 3 are what we call the Pure Precepts. All Buddhist teaching for right action is based on these 3 simple phrases. I will strive to do good. I will refrain from doing evil. And let's get rid of the mask. I've worn those so long I forget they're there. I will cherish all life. They set the standard for and sum up the Buddhist perspective on climate change, the effects of our actions and inactions, what we Buddhists call karma, have the timeless consequences and carry timeless consequences and reverberate throughout space and time forever. For many years, Buddhist clergy, teachers, and laity have used every medium at their disposal to spread awareness of this climate change crisis and make its potential effects a reality for everyone. We are, by training, resilient. That resilience, along with cooperation and collaboration, not competition or aggression, will curb the effects of this great worldwide unraveling. Speaking authentically, without being self-righteous or attached to any particular approach or strategy, may open the way for others to become more aware and receptive to dealing with this problem constructively. In recent decades, a concept called engaged Buddhism has evolved in our practice, a term introduced by Thich Nhat Hanh. At a 2014 United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, he said, "Whatever nationality or culture we belong to, whatever religion we follow, we can all see that the earth is not inert matter. She is a great being who has herself given birth to many other great beings, including Buddhas, prophets, saints, sons and daughters of humankind." This is the kind of awareness, the kind of awakening that we need, and the future of the planet depends on whatever we're able to cultivate this, whether we're able to cultivate this insight or not. Another example of our perspective is from Yale University's Buddhist Declaration on Climate Change in 2015. It has recently become quite obvious that significant changes are also needed in the way our economic system is structured. Global warming is intimately related to the gargantuan quantities of energy that our industries devour to provide the levels of consumption that many of us have learned to expect. From a Buddhist perspective, a sane and sustainable economy would be governed by the principle of sufficiency. The key to happiness is contentment, rather than an ever-increasing abundance of goods. The compulsion to consume more and more is an expression of craving, the very thing that the Buddha pinpointed as the root cause of suffering. Instead of an economy that emphasizes profit and requires perpetual growth to avoid collapse, we need to move together towards an economy that provides a satisfactory standard of living for everyone. If political leaders are unable to recognize the urgency of our global crisis, we may need to challenge them with sustained campaigns of citizen action. This declaration was a call for the engaged Buddhism mentioned earlier. Our efforts must be a compassionate approach to social activism. No rancor or argument, just dedication and example. This includes everything from feeding the hungry, to housing the homeless, to securing medical care for the poor. We believe, and it will work with climate change. Our beliefs encourage participation in lobbying government and economic institutions with nonviolent demonstrations to curb harmful corporate motivations. An example of this success was a nationwide vigil in 2019 in which congregations of Buddhists, priests, and laity gathered at Fort Sill and other proposed internment sites, protesting the detaining of refugee children from the border separated from their families. It received a great deal of public notice. This effort resulted in an immediate reversal of Homeland Security's internment policy. May we also not forget that refugees are not only fleeing onerous political situations. Climate change is generating massive population shifts that must be managed with understanding and ingenuity in a massive scale. Hundreds of thousands from all over the world, including some at our borders, are driven to migrate by climates that no longer sustain the agriculture and the occupations that have nurtured them for millennia. Buddhists spend a lot of time in quiet contemplation, believing that spiritual practice should be employed along with education and activism. Spiritual resources can help move people toward right thinking. But when issues threaten living beings, we are fearlessly on the front line, willing to face danger and to promote change. Let us act together, become engaged, and spread social awareness on every front with flexible creativity in thinking about how to respond, how to shift, and open awareness in people's hearts to the great unraveling of our environmental well-being. When the fate of a just, peaceful, and sustainable world is at stake, Buddhists can and do get off their meditation cushions when careful, skillful, and effective means for solving this crisis are determined. Buddhists worldwide are and will be out in force to support them. Thank you very much. Gotta get the mask. That was mask. That was an accident. At my age, if you need to get somebody's absolute attention, all you have to do is stumble. Whether it's real or not.
All right, I'll try that when my turn comes. Kate Mcclellan lives full-time in Western Lane County on property that she has been visiting regularly since childhood. She is retired from 25 years working in a medium-sized city in California. She's a member of the Palo Alto Friends meeting for Quakers, and now is active in the Florence area worship group. which is under the care of the Eugene Friends meeting. Kate McClellan.
Awesome.
Well, thank you. It's lovely to be here, even though I'm here because I was going to find someone to represent Quakers.
Hold the mic close.
Oh, I'm sorry. So, I am not a minister or a pastor in the usual sense, because in the unprogrammed Quaker tradition from which I come, there aren't any. And in fact, we often joke that we did not, we eliminated the clergy, and we did not eliminate the clergy, we eliminated the laity. We are all ministers, but we have no special status. Shortly before I retired, I was at a meeting when I mentioned that I was going to something regarding Quakers that evening, and one colleague said, "Oh, they still have Quakers?" So I thought on that note that I ought to say a little bit about Quakers, since they're a little obscure for most people. Their origins are during the Second Reformation in England in the 1640s and 50s. That's about over 350 years ago. The official name is the Religious Society of Friends. It started as the Religious Society of Friends of Truth from a verse in the Gospel of John. From George Fox's journal, it was Justice Bennet of Derby who first called us Quakers, because we bid them tremble at the word of God, and that was in the year 1650. George Fox was seeking God's guidance during the 1640s and traveled throughout England searching for someone who could tell him the path. Again from his journal. When all my hopes in priests and preachers and in all men were gone, so that I had nothing outwardly to help me, nor could tell what to do, oh, then I heard a voice which said, "There is one, even Christ Jesus, that can speak to thy condition." And when I heard it, my heart did leap for joy. Fox then carried this message to churches throughout England and was joined by others who were convinced. In 1656, the elders of the meeting at Balby in Yorkshire, England, drafted a collection of advices, and this process has been continued today through books of faith and practice published by the yearly meetings, which are regional associations of Quaker groups. The Eugene Friends meeting is part of the North Pacific Yearly Meeting, whose faith and practice includes historical notes about Quakers in general and Quakers in the Western U.S. in particular. This is what it looks like. Quakers don't have a creed as such. They focus more on what to do and to be rather than what to believe. As would be expected from a book of faith and practice, it provides guidance for Quakers in both faith and practice. While each yearly meeting has some variations in content and presentation, they generally include the testimonies of simplicity, integrity, community, equality, and stewardship. In addition, there are general guidelines for each meeting to conduct business such as membership, marriages, our memorials, all the ways that we relate in community. Our testimony of simplicity leads us to avoid excessive acquisitions and busyness, of community to concern for people in all circumstances, while stewardship leads us to care of the earth as stewards rather than exploiters. I'm speaking as a Quaker, and I think I'm representing their views reasonably well, but there is a saying, if you meet one Quaker, you have met one Quaker. So, keep that in mind. Don't set up any expectations. Quakers believe that there is that of God in everyone, and that the inner spirit is available to each of us for an encounter with the divine. As a group, we've set intentional moments to encourage that encounter and to provide an opportunity for individuals to offer ministry from that encounter. This is our meeting for worship. We also plan to act from leadings of the Spirit during that encounter. We have a process of discernment to help us make sure we act from authentic leading of the Spirit rather than from ego-driven anger, outrage, desire, etc. As an example of local action for stewardship, someone in the Eugene Friends meeting felt a leading for Earth Prayer Witness beyond that which she does a great job of manifesting in her personal life, to share that witness so that we can support each other in efforts to be mindful of the earth. She requested that a small group be gathered to help her discern the authenticity of the leading. Then that was shared with the meeting as a whole. The result is a monthly newsletter that everyone can contribute to with what we have done and what we intend to do for Earth Care. And I think on the round table or somewhere back there, I actually brought some copies of it. I know you all need another piece of paper. On the national level, Quakers advocate for their values through the Friends Committee on National Legislation, which began in the 1940s. Every 2 years, FCNL solicits the views and concerns of Quaker meetings, churches, and organizations around the country to help discern priorities for their local lobbying and public education work. FCNL seeks to collaborate across the political spectrum to advance these priorities. These are 2 of the 12 priorities they identified for the 117th Congress. Strengthen environmental protections and advance environmental justice while recognizing the finite capacity of the earth and the need to protect human, animal, and plant diversity. And promote sustainable science-based solutions to the climate crisis and prioritize international cooperation to achieve global sustainability goals and protect vulnerable populations. FCNL provides training in advocacy and lobbying from a values base. Many friends who are in public office have benefited from this training. Many friends, oh, 1 minute, oh. Well, they said to slow down, not read too fast. Anyway, again, I have handouts, so they're on the back.
Thank you.
So I wanted to end with, from the North Pacific Yearly Meeting, Faith and Practice. We have what we call, as I mentioned briefly, advices and queries are in our books. So, harmony with creation. We face the difficult challenge to change our manner of living to come into harmony with creation. As we support each other's efforts to use no more than our fair share, we guard against waste and resist the temptations of convenience and the inertia of the status quo. We help each other look for ways to counter attitudes of human arrogance, domination, and greed, which threaten Earth's equilibrium. In what ways do we seek harmony with creation? How does science help us live within it respectfully? In what ways do we honor all living things? Do we seek the holiness inherent in the order of nature, the wildness of wilderness, and the richness of the world? How do our daily habits and choices reflect our respect for the web of life? What will the impact of our current choices be on the lives of future generations? How do we educate ourselves and others about living in harmony with the earth? What can we do to make the community of life whole? Thank you.
I'm not Mark, and that's because I get to introduce Mark. Cantor Mark Levy is a singer, songwriter, and activist who has traveled extensively performing for diverse groups and officiated as cantor for many synagogues and temples across the country. He has studied and benefited from many religious and spiritual traditions and believes firmly that all have merit in teaching us how to live with each other and protect the planet. Mark.
Why is this reminding me of my bar mitzvah?
You didn't have a mask on, but
You can take your mask off.
Oh, thanks for reminding me. So, there's a saying that laws are like sausages. It's best not to see them made. And I would add to that list biblical exegesis. That's a theology joke. Exegesis just means interpretation. The front row is laughing at that. So I titled this convocation The Green Old Deal, and I thought that would be pretty self-evident, but a few people asked me, what did you mean by that? Well, I just mean that we've had some things that have come down to us over thousands of years that speak to this issue. And I mentioned already what's faith got to do with it. Well, I think we're learning that in a very well-rounded way. I only got one sheet here, I think, so I paced myself. Oh, I see it formatted into two. Well, it's not longer. Okay, so Pope Francis said, we are stewards, not masters of our earth. Each of us has a personal responsibility to care for the precious gift of God's creation. We often hear from a sector of the religious community that there is no connection between human activity and the warming of the planet. God is in control, is their plaintive motto. This relinquishing of responsibility is not only dangerous, but counter to the very scriptures held in reverent respect by adherents to our faiths. For is it not set down in early Genesis, the story of creation, that humankind is given stewardship over the earth? Genesis 2:15. And the Lord God took man and put him into the Garden of Eden to work it and to preserve it. The Hebrew words are la'avda u'lashamra. I promise all Hebrew will be translated. Literally means to work her and guard her, spelling out humankind's obligation to both serve and watch over the earth from the beginning of the scripture. In Genesis 1:28, we also see the commandment, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it. The Hebrew word for subdue, bakivshuha, can actually be translated conquer. And the text continues, have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the air and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. Well, I had trouble with that early on, that concept of conquering and subduing. In fact, I had trouble with a lot of the rabbis. And unless I shouldn't diverge too much, but one rabbi kicked me out of his class because, we're taught in Judaism that you can't mix milk with meat when you have to have 2 sets of dishes, all that stuff. What was given as the explanation is you shouldn't seethe a kid in its mother's milk. So I raised my hand and I said, Rabbi, then how come we can bread chicken in egg batter?
Oh my God.
I mean, that's cooking the actual offspring into, its mother. That got me kicked out of class. Get out of here, kid, you're ruining my cake. Okay, so getting back to conquer and subdue, this seems to indicate that man is charged with ruling over the earth and its creatures. The word conquer can be troubling, but when we look at the struggle to derive sustenance from the desert or other less than productive lands, we see the meaning really is to succeed in triumphing over adverse circumstances. Having dominion, though, is a double-edged sword. order in that man has certain abilities that allow for both sustaining the earth or bringing ruin to it. We see that failure in a bit farther in Genesis and the resulting cataclysmic event, which is called the flood. There is some scientific evidence that this was an actual event in ancient times, and that it was the result of melting glaciers which caused the mother of all floods. The story of this flood is recounted in many religious traditions. It was, of course, in ancient times before the burning of fossil fuels, but the point is that warming conditions can cause such cataclysmic events. In our day, human activity is undeniably a contributing factor. Early in the chapter, it is made clear that the corruption of human beings is cause for their destruction. Genesis 13 says, "And God said to Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth has become full of robbery because of them. And behold, I am destroying them from the earth." The Hebrew word Hamas, here translated as robbery, has the connotation both of oppression and brutality toward the earth, as if the guardianship over it by human beings has been abused and violated. God has thus seen fit to destroy all life with the flood. The rainbow after the flood is a sign of redemption, and God pledges no more floods but the fire next time. There are several scriptural passages presaging the destruction of the earth by fire. In the New Testament, this theme is repeated both as a warning and as a prophecy to the sons of man. The theme of the sacredness of earth continues throughout the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament. In the Quran, there is also a saying, "Trust in Allah, but tie the camel's leg." This is, of course, a version of God helps them who help themselves. In the Talmud, there is a precept called Bal Tashkit, or do not destroy, which prohibits the destruction of fruit trees during a siege to a city. Its rabbinical interpretation has become very broad, forbidding all wanton destruction. The biblical origin of this is Deuteronomy 20, verse 19. "When in your war against a city, you have to besiege it for a long time in order to capture it. You must not destroy its trees, wielding the axe against them. You may eat of them, but you must not cut them down. Only trees that you know do not yield food may be destroyed. You may cut them down for constructing siege works." So unnecessary destruction of resources is therefore prohibited, which has broad application in our day. Climate change should not be made a political issue, but it must be a pivotal concern for all human beings, including religious institutions. If we are to survive into the next century, all effort needs to be made to curb the pollution that threatens life and the ecosystem on which we thrive. Leaving this up to God, as if there is no responsibility laid upon human beings, is a betrayal to future generations, and the consequences grow more evident as each day passes. Thank you. And I think I saw Reverend Bob Barrett come in. Yes. Reverend Bob, as he likes to be called, graduated from Phillips Theological Seminary in May of 2012 and was ordained by the Presbytery of Southern Kansas as a chaplain of Wesley Medical Center Clinical Pastoral Educational Program. He is very pleased to be serving as the pastor of Yahats Community Presbyterian Church. I wanted to say, if you weren't going to, that we did approach the local Presbyterian Church, but they had other commitments, and I think we found a very worthy substitute.
Gosh, thank you, and I am sorry I wasn't here for the entire program. We are kicking off a month-long kindness campaign in Yahats, and today was our kickoff concert. We had a group called Deva Trio doing world music, flamenco, guitar, and violin. The violinist is a young lady from, she's Ukrainian and Russian, and so it's got a but she's fabulous. I do need to apologize. I left with some of my notes, but the text of what I was going to say today on the printer in the office. It has just been a really crazy week. My son Zachary, a month ago, was diagnosed with advanced stage renal cell carcinoma and just had surgery on Tuesday. So I've been running around like a chicken with my head cut off. But I think I remember enough of what I was going to say to pull it off. I wanted to start with a quote from Ban Ki-moon, the UN General Assembly Secretary, who says, "We are the first generation to be able to end poverty, and the last generation that can take steps to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. Future generations will judge us harshly if we fail to uphold our moral and historical responsibilities." And I think that we do have a moral and historical responsibility, but for too long, in too many churches, we have turned a deaf ear and a blind eye to climate change, and it's something that we just don't want to talk about. I read a study, it's a little bit dated now, but in 2015, Yale University said that 2/3 of Americans believe in climate change, yet 2/3 of Americans never talk about it. And I think in many of our churches, those numbers are even higher. It's a political debate that we just don't want to have, especially in our polarized, politically charged environment of today, and with so many of the evangelical churches thinking that we have a disposable earth and we can use it up because God is going to make a new one. It just... Nearly 50 years ago, the Presbyterian Church first addressed eco-justice and climate change with a report titled "Restoring Creation for Ecology and Justice." There have been many more reports, almost as many as there have been General Assemblies since then. And this summer, the 225th General Assembly of the PCUSA will adopt a new report titled "Investing in a Green Future, a Vision for a Renewed Creation." I have some of the highlights, and it's just kind of interesting. But the first is that we must confess that we have not sufficiently responded to the cry of creation. They're calling on the church to work towards a goal of 100% renewable energy in congregations, mid-councils, and agencies within the PCUSA by 2030. They're calling on every congregation within the PCUSA to be a green certified congregation. We are affirming that the work of restoring creation not only includes establishing a right relationship between humans and nature, but also promoting economic justice for the human family and racial justice for society. In our culture, this means dismantling the white supremacy that permeates our lives and institutions, making reparations for centuries of harm. They go on to urge individuals, congregations, and mid-councils to make use of the extensive resources of the church on eco-justice, the Presbyterian Hunger Program, and Creation Justice Ministries. They are directing the Presbyterian Mission Agency to make restoring creation a key priority in its Matthew 25 initiative. They are affirming our belief in the right of humans to clean water and air. They are calling us to ensure that communities affected by environmental racism are included at the table and have the opportunity to provide leadership. They are calling on us to acknowledge the seriousness of local pollution, to affirm that those who suffer most have the strongest moral claim in shaping and restoring policy and practice. The list goes on and on. We only have a few minutes, but I am proud of my denomination for the work that they have done and for taking it seriously and calling for us to no longer remain silent in the face of this ecological disaster. And yet, with all of this, with all of the efforts by people of faith and goodwill, sea levels continue to rise. The speaker that we had at our church just before the pandemic started told us that they estimate that within 30 years, much of 101 from Coos Bay to Newport and beyond will be underwater. And we already see those effects when we have the king tides and they've got to put up the signs warning of water on the road, and that will only get worse. Forests are burning. Storms are more frequent and more intense. Crops are failing. Bees are dying. And scientists tell us that we may have already reached the point of no return. So what do we do? It's enough to drive us to despair. At times it seems like we are on the verge of giving up hope. But we are a people of hope. And to quote musician Holly Near, to give up hope would seem so strange. And it would dishonor those who come before us. And so we persist. We do what we can, where we can, within our sphere of influence. We build strong communities of mutual interdependence. We think globally, but act locally, which is what we are doing here. We educate, we advocate, we lobby. We turn our lawns into gardens. We reduce, we reuse, we recycle. We attempt as best we can to be carbon neutral. We buy electric vehicles. And we hope, and we hope, and we hope that as more of us wake up, as more of us engage in these communities of mutual independence, that change will spread out like ripples, like a stone being thrown into a pond. And that eventually it will be a mighty swell. And the people in charge are going to sit up and take notice. And the world will be restored. Amen.
Amen.
That is my phone, thank you. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Reverend Bob, especially driving down from Yahats and given your family situation. We wish you son a full recovery.
He is doing well, remarkably well.
Oh, that's good. In Hebrew, that's refuah shalema, full recovery. And before I pass, it wouldn't be a church gathering without passing around some collection buckets. I want to call Mike Allen up to make a brief announcement about his climate strike that's been happening for over 2 years. Mike.
Well, I'm really overwhelmed. This was a phenomenal message that you folks have given us. And you need to be applauded. The big take I took from all of you is hope. But the big message of it was that hope isn't realized. And I look at you when I say this, without action. And that was loud and clear from many of you. So I'm going to give you guys an opportunity for some action today. I've been circulating a petition for our city council to address climate change in the following way. We asked them to create a commission of people that are representative of our community to come up with a climate action plan that's unique to Florence. And I presented that petition. This will be 3 times over 2.5 years without any response from our mayor or our city council. So the action that I'm asking of you is, would you, during the break, come up and sign our petition? And what I'm going to be doing is, since we have a new county commissioner or county councilor on board, this Monday night they're going to be meeting in person. And I will, for the 4th time, present our petition to them, with the hopes that maybe this new counselor might have a say. So sign my petition. Now, as a gift, a parting gift, We have people from Earth Day event have created these nice posters. These are actually yard signs. I don't have the wires, but we have over 100. So please take one with you. And if you want to advertise even beyond this Monday night's meeting, another campaign, because I'm part of what is called the Florence Climate Emergency Campaign. And one of our campaign people made 100 of these bumper stickers. They say, tell City Hall to address climate change. And you can use them here in Florence, on your car, or up in Yahas, or anywhere it's needed. Wherever you drive, it makes sense. So these are giveaways as well. One last thing is, I want to thank, where is it? Where's Mark? We have to thank this man. He met me last summer at Farmers Market when I was getting signatures for our petition. And he came up and he signed it. Then he asked, and he always tells us as a joke, what can I do? And this is the third event that he's put on around the theme of climate in phenomenal ways. The first one had music, and he's a musician.
I'm going to sing a song in a minute.
The second one had education and a call to action. And here we have the assembled community of religious faith. Our next one will be at a climate strike on Earth Day. There's a flyer in the back. I'll give you a reminder of that. That'll be on April 22nd, on a Friday, and we'll do it from roughly 2 to 5, right in front of City Hall. So it'll be part of my climate strike, but it'll also be a celebration of Earth Day. So please help us in attend it. I do Friday climate strike every Friday. So Pat and I are somewhat alone sometimes, but other times we get a lot of good support. So from 1 to 2:30 every Friday. Come join us, just even for a moment. Now when you go back to sign our petition, ask Pat about the octopus and why we carry an octopus program. There's a good reason. And lastly, I'm also the leader of Elders Climate Action, Oregon chapter. I see a lot of white hair, so we have a lot of elders. Now, one of our positions of our chapter is that we want to reach out intergenerationally to the youth.
Work on it.
Hard to do. But they're out there. We just need to draw them in. And I'm going to, anybody that signs up and puts their email down, I'm going to put out an invitation to our next meeting of the chapter, which is coming up on the 14th at 7 o'clock. It's a Zoom meeting. And we're going to have a gentleman and some students, I hope, come from Partners for Sustainable Schools to talk about how we can create a network. And they're already doing it, but how to expand that network with us elders and others helping them. So a lot going on, a lot of action you can take. I don't want to take any more of your time. I can see you're restless, but let's stick around and meet us in the back. Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
It was suggested by one of the other speakers that I sing a song. And I do have a song before we break. I'll introduce it in a second. We do have people with tables back here, information, literature, signs, things you can sign. And as Mike mentioned, April 22nd, which is Earth Day, is on a Friday. And that'll be our next event. It'll be the climate change. And so take a flyer out there. I've got some hot off the press on the table. This is a song by Hannah Sench. She was killed during the Holocaust, rescuing Jews in Hungary. And she was a poet who was set to music later in Israel. I'll sing it in English first.
Take off your mask, Mark. When you
Oh,
sing.
yeah.
I understand.
Thanks. Oh Lord, my God, I pray that these things never end. The sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayers of the heart, the sand and the sea. the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayers of the heart. Eli, Eli, shelo yigamer le'olam, achov hayam, rishru shel hamayim, berak hashamayim, tfilat ha'adam, achov hayam, rishru shel hamayim, berak hashamayim, tfilat ha'adam. We have people also who have brought electric vehicles. They're over on this side of the church and designated parking for electrical vehicles just for today. And so feel free to go out and check those, and of course what's brought to the table. We have questions and answers for those of you who still have, well, my grandma used to call this Sitzfleisch. How do I translate that? It's like the mind can only absorb what the seat can withstand. I know it's been a long program, and if you do have questions, please come back in 10 or 15 minutes or so, and we'll entertain those. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.